Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're going to take a few episodes to talk about a TV series. Steve McQueen, who we've done Widows on. I think that might be the only film of his we've done on the podcast. But he's well known for... Well, he won the Turner Prize as an artist.
Yes.
And then he did Hunger, about Bobby Sands,
Yes.
the hunger striker in Ireland. Then he did Shame.
Yes.
Which I wasn't crazy about. I think that's my least favourite of his films.
Yeah, I liked it.
Then he did 12 Years a Slave, which was extraordinary.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of a hinge in cinema in some respects. I think the films that we've seen since 12 Years a Slave are telling black stories. I think they kind of came from there because that won so many Oscars and it was so big.
Yes.
I kind of feel like that emboldened something.
Yes, I think you might be right.
And then he did Widows, which, as I say, we've done. And which I came round on because I wasn't mad about that the first time, but you...
I love it.
And Lee Kemp, who we had on the podcast, kind of talked me into liking it more.
Oh, good.
And now he's doing this anthology series on the BBC. We've started with Mangrove, which is the first. The second will be Lovers Rock. Mangrove is a feature-length film. The rest are going to be shorter than this, I think. I know that Lovers Rock is about an hour long. This is 2 hours. And they tell stories about black British history. I think it makes a lot of sense to do this as a TV anthology because I think one thing that I think is true of all of Steve McQueen's work is a sense of social responsibility. And I think that's something that you can tie into TV so much because you have to be, I think, making TV pipes into people's homes for free. I think you have to be responsible and tell stories responsibly. And I kind of feel that with this, and I think it's a good fit.
Yes. I loved it. I thought it was great, really. I mean, I always had this question, and it's, it's not a dig and it's not, me putting a stance, but kind of, I wonder, how is this television in a way, yeah? Kind of, I think we're seeing these blurring of boundaries, like, between... kind of, what is film and what is television. What I liked, it has some of the poetry that I expect.
From visual artists.
Yeah, and which you rarely get in television in my experience. Yeah. So the film is full of shots of, the voice speakers over the rain. Yeah, the way that it holds certain cuts so that you pay attention to the image. Yeah, in between sequences. All of those things are kind of, they're very unusual. The way that, the waiting in jail, you get this, long take held for a long time of smoking, of smoke rings. Yeah, there are things like that kind of evoke, and kind of condense, and, that are a form of visual poetry that I don't think, that I don't associate with television normally. On the other hand, I think, the fact that it is television, in some ways also brings in something that I've found kind of missing in Steve McQueen's work till now, which is that it is accessible. And
I completely agree.
Yeah, and it is emotionally accessible. Yeah, kind of, there is a melodramatic verve to the storytelling here, which Widows would have greatly profited from.
I reckon, yeah.
It's kind of, it's not afraid of narrative and of plot and of characterization and on kind of relatively traditional narrative tropes of suspense, of keeping people waiting,
And I would say of exposition, which is normally a word that has all these negative connotations. And I think here, where it explains things to the audience, I think it really works. So the story is about the Mangrove restaurant in 1968, set up in 1968 by Frank Crichlow, a black man from Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of the characters here are from Trinidad and Tobago, in Notting Hill. And it becomes a kind of community centre for Notting Hill and for the various kind of black immigrants who live there. And it's constantly harassed by the police, who we are shown are deeply racist and do it for fun and take pride and joy in the pain that they cause the black residents of the area. The black residents march peacefully up to the police station, and they're chanting, they're holding placards and so on, and it turns into a fight. The police come there for a fight, and it kicks off, and then it goes to court, and so it becomes this courtroom drama where I think there are 9. They're the Mangrove Nine. And that's what they were called in that's what they're known as, the 9 defendants, who include Darcus Howe, who was the only one I recognised.
Yes, me too.
And he's a kind of central figure in Notting Hill Carnival, but so are all these people. And a lot of them defend themselves, and they go to the Old Bailey. The Old Bailey, as the film explains, and this is what I'm saying about exposition, the film explains this is where the worst crimes are tried, rape, murder, that kind of thing. So they're setting an example here, they're trying to tell you to know your place. I don't mind that the film explains that in dialogue. I think it's kind of fine that you have to read into it yourself. Do you know what I mean? I
think the film or the work benefits from it. It kind of, you know where you stand in relation to the characters.
And they talk about big ideas, which I think is part of it. So Darcus Howe in particular is a big ideas guy, and I think there's a really interesting tension, at least for a while, between kind of small ideas and big ideas. So Frank, who runs the restaurant, I think it's interesting that he's older than the activists who are younger than he is. They're kind of in their 20s, maybe early 30s, and he seems to be in his 40s at least. And he's just running a business, right? He used to run this restaurant, I forget the name, and it appears to have been a place where there was kind of illegal gambling and drug smoking, because when he's accused of that by the police, he doesn't deny any of it. He says, no, but this place is different. We're not doing that here. This is a real restaurant and so on. So the Mangrove becomes a kind of hub for the community without him really intending it to. And it's Darcus Howe, in fact, who talks him round to supporting the march that they end up going on. Darcus Howe is a guy with big ideas, and I mean, he's associated early on with reading, and he talks. And I kind of thought, oh yeah, but he's not doing anything. And then, of course, he does go on to do things, and he ends up giving this... he cross-examines the police officers in court, and it's wonderful because it's got so many of the courtroom scenes that I love, where someone picks apart why someone was lying and does so beautifully and elegantly, and there's a lot of that. And then he goes on to give the wonderful summation, which is so powerful, that leads to the gallery, which is full of members of the community all cheering, and so kind of he becomes it's interesting because there's no central hero. This is a film about community, and the cast is a community too. No, not one of them takes the lead.
Yes,
they have the lead at different points.
It's very unusual in that regard. Yeah, it's a 2-hour television film that doesn't have a protagonist, or where the couple isn't a protagonist. It is really about a group of people, and a group of people on trial, because I think it's also important that it is a courtroom drama, or, it quickly becomes one, right? I would say almost the last hour.
I mean, it seems like the last half of the film, yeah.
Yeah, is a courtroom drama. So it is like this group of people that's on trial for the color of their skin. So it is a film about big ideas. In fact, I think it begins with C.L.R. James discussing with Howe. And
yes, on TV.
So and he's a famous kind of political economist, I would say, or
right.
Political philosopher, who wrote, as my brother-in-law keeps telling me, a fantastic book on cricket. So it begins kind of, as that dialogue. Yeah, he's the old guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it begins with kind of key historical figures. Yeah, and so it is instantly a film about ideas. Yeah. And about justice and rights and so on.
Yeah, but then they become action. I think that's kind of where I suppose I was going. The idea that action is kind of separate from ideas at the start. I kind of thought, Darcus Howe is talking, but the action is elsewhere. The action is in this restaurant, which is getting harassed, and people get beaten up and so on. And just with random black kids on the street who get harassed, they see the police officers. They play cards. Whoever draws the ace of spades has to nick the first black guy they see.
Yes.
And that's part of their fun and games.
So I wanted to say, that in a slightly different context, that is part of my lived experience.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
You know, because I think it's kind of worth reminding people, you know, like kind of what is depicted in this film in relation, you know, to race. You know, I experienced in relation to homosexuality in Montreal. The police would just raid these places for fun and terrorize you, and they'd get a kick out of that. Yeah. So, and it also obviously kind of went a lot further there, but you know, I think it's important to remind people that it's not a distant past. It's probably still going on in relation to kind of different groups and different areas. Yeah, one could see. Well, I was going to bring up the U.S., but actually, I think it's important to keep it distinct. I mean, obviously, what we see in this film is influenced by American civil rights struggles. Yeah.
Well, the Black Panthers have a presence in this film.
Yeah.
They had a presence in Britain at the time.
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's informed by that, but obviously it's kind of like a clearly distinct history with a clearly distinct soundtrack, which I think is worth mentioning.
Yeah. Although to be fair, I didn't pick up on many songs, but I just noted the ambience.
Oh well, I knew them all, and they are all kind of reggae or reggae influenced, or you know, it's kind of a completely so. You can imagine a film about this being set in the U.S. and it would all be like Aretha Franklin and Marvin Gaye and the Supremes and James Brown and.
I mean, if you think back to we saw Detroit back when we started doing the podcast, which was about similar.
Yes, that's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure the soundtrack in that had that kind of thing going on.
Yeah,
because it started off with a party. And,
yeah, so this is, you know, I think what I loved about this film is the Britishness of it. Yeah, that, you know, even the soundtrack is a different one. It would be kind of, you know, what people of Caribbean descent or origin would be listening to in Britain in this period. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually I couldn't name all the songs, but I know them all. And actually I think some of them, you know, I danced to them as a teenager. So, you know, they're part of my soundtrack as well. And they're beautifully used, actually.
And the music makes up part of the community. Everyone's playing steel drums. In fact, the Letitia Wright character, who's a kind of Black Panther representative who comes in to be talking to people about supporting the trade unions and so on, she's sort of made to play the steel drums by Frank early on as like a test. Like it's a light-hearted thing. But, you know, it's like that is central to the thing. As soon as people start playing the steel drums, everyone gets out in a conga line, effectively, and goes out to the street. And it's wonderful.
Yes.
You know?
I'm trying to think about, because I do think this is wonderful, actually, you know, and I was thinking, you know, what do I like about this that I sometimes dislike about other films that we've seen, other American films that we've seen recently on, you know, the similar topics. And I think what this lacks is the kind of superior smarminess that you sometimes get, you know, in kind of, you know, some of these American works like Ava DuVernay or something. Yeah, the sense that of righteousness, that you are right and you have the knowledge, and
it's a common criticism of yours, the idea that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah,
you pretend that you do.
Yeah. You know, so actually, I think this is a very generous-hearted film, and a kind of a very honest one, right? Like, you know, so from what you were saying, yeah, the protagonist, before he did the Mangrove, you know, he ran this other business that had drugs and prostitutes and, you know, that lots of gay men went to, right? And kind of, you know, he's not embarrassed about it, and you know, that is part of what it is. And actually, and you could imagine how a club like that would also in its own way be a shelter, if not quite a community center to many people as well. And there's a narrative drive into it that actually, you know, it's a leap to respectability that is being shut down. Yeah, it's almost as much the move to something without a criminal element. It's almost like your place is within this underworld. Yeah, that's kind of what a lot of the struggle in the film is about. But, you know, there's a struggle for justice and liberation, but without that American type of smugness. And I like that very much.
I agree with you. I also think it's got a fantastic sense of humour.
Yes.
It makes loads of good jokes, and a lot of the jokes come out of the black characters observing something that happens in court, and laughing at, well, it can be that, or it can be the fact that you recognise that something is obviously silly. Well, my favourite joke in the thing was everyone in the High Court, everyone in the Old Bailey is wearing these silly wigs. That's what they do.
Yes.
That's part of the uniform. And I think there's mention of it early on. But, you used to let it pass that they all wear wigs. And then all the defendants who are sat together, the Mangrove Nine, are wearing these very normal navy blue beanies, hats. And the judge orders them to take those silly things off.
Yes.
Which is great. And it's not pointed up, but I thought that was so good. And they really point out, again, in dialogue, that by representing themselves especially, they are challenging the status quo. They're challenging the system. They're challenging the self-importance of the system. And, they make the point that, win or lose, by going into court and representing ourselves and making our own arguments, that is a victory. That is a victory. There's a bigger, again, big idea, small idea thing. Like, the big idea is a structural victory. And this was the first case, this is what I was reading, and I think it may have said something similar at the end of the film, that acknowledged, judicially acknowledged racism in the Metropolitan Police. That's not an accident that these guys achieved that.
Yes. Though, I think part of the reason why I really love this show, this film, is because it has nuance. You get the overarching kind of story in a way that is moving and exciting. But then there's also all these little things, right? And so, for example, at the end, you see Frank with his wife in their apartment, I think before going to court, and you see this blurry reflection in the mirror, and it's clearly that his wife is white, yeah? It's not mentioned, but it's a minor kind of thing, but which brings up whole issues of interracial marriage, of blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it doesn't have the separatism, that you sometimes see in other works, that insists on it. This is all really driven by black people, but, you have kind of the solicitor who's an ally and a pal and helps, yeah? It kind of, so the focus is, on the Mangrove Nine, yeah, but you also get the sense that, they didn't do it alone, yeah, and lives are lived in a way that are not separatist, that are part of the larger culture. And in fact, I think the whole kind of latter quarter of the film makes as its focus the fact that, it's not just an issue about race, or rather that it is an issue about race, but one that affects the civil liberties of the nation as a whole. Yeah, and that's kind of the ground in which it's fought. Yeah. The right of assembly and the right of protest and so on is kind of, is being fought over this question of race. Yeah, but it has ramifications for everybody, no matter what their race.
Yeah, and for the future, when Frank is kind of really ground down by the system and by the fight, and he's getting close to taking the plea and taking 5 years, or I think it was mentioned, the Letitia Wright character, she says, my kids, my unborn kids, like, it matters to them too, this is for everybody. And there's they know their place in history. And again, Darcus Howe, when he gives that summation, says much the same thing. He says, win or lose, I don't really care. History's on my side. There's a kind of... I'd be interested to know how many of those remarks were taken from his actual clothes.
I imagine quite a lot.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Because this is 50 years on. This does have a place in history. Although, to be fair, this isn't a story that I knew, and I don't know how unusual I am in not having heard of it. It's not something that... But to be fair, I didn't even fucking know Dunkirk until... Somehow I'd missed Dunkirk. But I think it might be similar to the trial of the Chicago 7, which I think was around the same time in America, and Aaron Sorkin's done a film on that on Netflix. Although I'm nervous about that, because I was reading to people saying, like, how can you... Because he said, I only just heard about this. And people were saying, how can you write The West Wing and not be aware of this sort of history? But that's another thing. But so I don't know how unusual I am in not knowing about this specifically. Maybe that's just like rank, normal white ignorance in this country.
Yes.
And it's much more common knowledge in the black community.
Yes, I must say I didn't know about this. And I'd kind of, many, many years ago, but I had done some research into Black British cinema and, you know, the Sankofa Collective and, you know, Isaac Julian's films and so on. And I didn't, I mean, you know, you have a vague sense of a history of black protests in the Notting Hill, you know, and so on. But I didn't know about this case specifically, even though, of course, you know, I think ever since I've been living in England, you've seen Darcus Howe on television, you know, in the news. Every time there's some kind of, you know, incident, he was kind of an important go-to figure. Though I haven't seen him recently, actually. But
that's because he died 3 years ago.
Oops. Well, there you go. That explains it. Anyway,
I rather like the Scottish lawyer who comes in to help them.
Yes,
and
I like
kind of
him.
leads the case from the bench.
Yes,
he was Scottish. I looked the guy up. He was a Scottish lawyer, but I think it's kind of there's something nice about him being Scottish and coming into the very English Old Bailey and again kind of making a mess of it in a sense, trying to disrupt it. There's a smile on his. He knows that he's not going to win the various arguments that he makes, really. Like, he talks about wanting an all-black jury and goes back to the Magna Carta to make the argument that there's precedent for this or that there's a basis in law to make this argument. And, of course, it gets dismissed immediately, out of hand. But, you know, he has this smile on his face when he sits down because he's got the argument on the record. That's really what it's about, I think. He knows, again, that the picture is bigger than this. And the film actually finishes with Frank outside the restaurant, you know, having a cigarette, and someone, you know, one of the guys comes up and says to him, you know, you won the battle, but we'll see about the war. And again, I think that speaks to this stratification of something small related to something much bigger.
Yes, but also I think, you know, an intelligence, and even though the film works on you emotionally, it's not sentimental the way that, again, I often find a lot of these American films. You know, the film gives you an emotional send-off, they win, you know, but actually it then has all these addendums, right? You know, the club continued to be raided, or he didn't get an apology, or, you know, it took like 15 years or whatever to get £50,000 in damages, and then eventually the club had to close down in 1992 anyway. Yeah. So what you get in this final victory is that actually the struggle continues, you know, and actually it's that element. So I don't want to overemphasize, or I don't want it to make it seem that the kind of part of what I like about this is that, you know, it includes on the margins kind of white people, you know, that's not what I want to touch on. But I think what I want to touch on is that any struggle is always fought with coalitions of people. And it's important that whilst not telling the story, whilst kind of focusing here very much on the nine, that on the margins, you not only see, like, you know, the cop being the horrible racist bully that he is, but you also see that Scottish lawyer probably offering his services, you know. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
You know what else is big picture, small picture, I just realised, is the name of the whole anthology, Small Acts. Yes. It refers to, or it's drawn from a Bob Marley song. And I can't remember the line exactly, but it's something like, you're the big tree, we're the small axe. And I think the song was referring to the music industry. Right. The music industry was the thing we'd have to chop down. That relates to the entire thing, right? This is one small battle that takes place in a much, much bigger picture. And I think so that is probably a through line that we should be looking at in the rest of the series.
Right, okay. That's a very good idea.
It's there in the title.
So, I also want to say something because, you know, obviously, like, my friends have been on Facebook saying, oh, you know, this is fantastic, you should really see it. And, you know, I was still kind of...
About this in particular?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I was kind of, you know, the combination of it being Steve McQueen, whom I love, but who's always requires effort, right? And the viewing of the films is never quite like a pleasant experience, yeah,
they put you through the ringer a bit.
So I thought, oh, so if you had any reservations like mine, forget about it, right? Like, kind of, you know, this is hugely enjoyable, important, and I think actually it should be getting a lot more attention than it's been getting, because, you know, I haven't heard anyone say anything negative about it, but you would expect for something this major that there would be a huge kind of concerted publicity push on it, you know, in a way that other television shows get, and that I haven't seen for this.
I'm not sure I have, although I don't think it's snuck out either, and I think it's something that I'd heard of before I came to it. And
Sure.
was I surprised at how much I enjoyed it? I don't know. Because the reservation that you mention about Steve McQueen's work being kind of hard work at times is true, but that didn't occur to me. And from the moment it started, it kind of seemed clear to me that the tone in here was lighter. Might not be quite the right term, although I think it is probably. But more accessible. It's more keen for you to understand it, and I think that goes along with it being television. This isn't something where, the thing was with Widows, with 12 Years a Slave. The idea is that you're sat in a cinema with no escape, and you can be shown whatever you need to be shown. And in here, I think there's more of an effort to grab you, keep your attention, and make things easier.
Yes, I think without a doubt. So it is. It's a work that is very intent on communicating with its audience, and it makes it as easy as possible to do so without dumbing it down. I agree. Is from the beginning, intelligent. It's a work about ideas, about history, and so on. It doesn't dumb it down at all, but it gives you all the information you need, and it engages you emotionally, in very direct ways.
I think as well, and this may have something to do with it being on television rather than cinema, is there seems to be less of an instinct to show you the really horrific things. So people get beaten in this film.
Yes.
People get kind of locked away and very, very bad mistreated. Like I say, you see this one black kid get chased for no reason and arrested by the cops and so on. And you understand that it's all happening. It's very legible, but I think it may be related to the fact that this is, again, like you have to be responsible when you're putting things in people's homes through television, that it's not it's not overly graphic, for one thing. And, it kind of cuts away by the point you very clearly understand what's happening, or something is shown out of focus. I'm thinking of when, I forget who it is, it might be Darcus Howe, when he's manhandled by the court officer and beaten in the face. The focus is in front of him. So that happens in the background, but it's quite clear what you just saw. I think there's an element of restriction of that, which I think really suits the film, and maybe kind of keeps you from being turned off. And there's nothing as like the hanging scene in 12 Years a Slave in this, where that was the objective of that scene, was to face you with it.
Yes. I want to talk also a little bit about the look of the film, because I think it looks fantastic. It's all these kind of brown and yellows and these color combinations that you don't often see on television, and also the way that all of the characters are lit, which you can easily distinguish, kind of the various shades of brown that people are, and the various shades of brown in people's faces. Kind of in a way that again is unusual.
I didn't think that about the colour combinations though, because not that I thought they were boring, but I thought these are colours I associate with the period, with the area, the kind of things that people wear and so on. Maybe a little bit more colourful.
Yes, they are the colours of the period for sure. But I also think they speak a particular culture. That bright yellow umbrella. Against, because it's yellow and purple. With Letitia Wright's face framed on that, right? It's kind of, it's a very beautiful image, and actually, all of the colours complement each other and frame her. So,
it's a very beautifully put together and considered film. The attention to the image is. You really actually can kind of revel in it. I think that's wonderful. And even though, again, televisually, I think it has a televisual aspect. There's an awful lot of close up, but they're still artfully framed. Interesting angles are found.
Yes.
But to be fair, I must say, when it got into certain parts of the courtroom scenes, I thought, this is what I associate with British courtroom drama on TV.
Yes.
A lot of the look, and that might partially be because you don't see courtroom dramas in Britain in cinema very much. Actually, they really are the domain of TV. So those images, I guess, kind of get associated with those sets and
they
and
have
the dress.
become
but still, I think that's something that I find very televisual, and I find it televisual here. Still, kind of like I say, considered interesting, beautiful, and so on.
It is television. but I did think that there were things that I don't normally associate with television, and that is kind of, the use of the poetic image, as consistently as you see it here. Also, the courage or the confidence is a better word, to hold on to time. Yeah, so, some shots are really held for a long time. Yeah, I don't know, 5 seconds or 10. Yeah, it's a long time to hold a shot, right?
You're thinking of the colander rocking from side to side when they've been raided.
I'm thinking of the colander. I'm also thinking of, the roof in the Old Bailey. Yeah, when the camera goes up and you see that shot for a really long time. There's a few of those. There's a shot of a fender, in the rain with a megaphone reflected on it that's held for a really long time. So quite a lot of that.
And also there's a lot of long take, and long take in that kind of remember the long take in Hunger was like super showy off. It was just sitting there for 20 minutes and go through the scene, and the shot itself wasn't actually showing off. It was sat on a tripod, but it was the whole, that scene was a kind of stunt, I suppose. It's not quite like that, but this is a kind of Spielberg-y long take, like I think we've talked about before, where it's about doing something in one take if you can, not cutting if you don't have to. So the camera will follow people around. It'll go into the restaurant, out of the restaurant, and it's all very natural. You don't actually notice. I picked up on it. I was watching quite attentively, and I saw it happen. But it's not drawing attention to itself in the way that you associate like a Paul Thomas Anderson shot from like Boogie Nights, or the shot from Goodfellas, or that kind of thing. But again, it speaks to a kind of a consideration of the image and a carefulness with what's being set up, and I like that.
So we are now going to see the second one, which is called
Lovers Rock.
Lovers Rock. So on the basis of what we've seen now, what will you now be looking for in Lovers Rock?
Well, as I mentioned, I'll be looking for the small acts idea of small ideas and big ideas, or a small fight in a much bigger world, that kind of thing. I think that kind of contrast very much came through in this.
And stylistically?
Stylistically, I don't know what the second one's about. Really, maybe it sounds like it's about music. So
I don't know.
So
we'll see.
I don't know, but it'll be the setting, the colours, as you mentioned. I think I'll be looking for more long takes because I like spotting that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect, really.
All right. Well, we'll see when we see it, which we shall do so now. So in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.